Kathy Engelbert is officially in freefall, and she's taking the WNBA's credibility with her. What started as whispers of incompetence has spiraled into a full-blown leadership crisis after a leaked private conversation exposed the commissioner trashing Caitlin Clark behind closed doors. And the leak didn't come from a random source. It came from Nafisa Collier, one of the league's most respected players, who made it very clear. The locker room has turned on Engelbert. This wasn't misunderstanding or an offhand remark. Engelbert allegedly called players ungrateful and minimized Clark's impact, painting herself as a league savior while dismissing the very athletes who've kept the lights on. Then she tried to walk it back. Badly. And if you thought damage control was going to fix it, you haven't been paying attention. Within days, Sophie Cunningham jumped in, calling Engelbert delusional. Caitlin Clark followed up with a statement during her exit interview, pushing for better leadership. It wasn't subtle. By the time ESPN analysts like Stephen A. Smith and Scott Van Pelt weighed in, demanding Engelbert step down, the writing was already on the wall. The media has turned, the players have turned, and now all eyes are on Adam Silver. The NBA commissioner, who backed Engelbert's appointment in the first place, is under pressure to clean up the mess before the WNBA collapses under the weight of its own dysfunction.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
And while Engelbert clings to her title, the league is already floating replacements. Nancy Lieberman, a coaching legend with decades of credibility, and Sandy Brondello, one of the most respected figures in the sport, are being whispered as possible successors. Both have what Engelbert lacks: trust, experience, and the respect of the locker room. This isn't just karma. It's the inevitable result of treating your players like PR pawns instead of professionals. Engelbert's leadership has been exposed as performative at best, authoritarian at worst. With internal dissent exploding and public opinion in flames, her position isn't just shaky, it's unsalvageable. Kathy Engelbert's time at the top of the WNBA is collapsing faster than anyone expected. After months of brushing off criticism, dismissing players, and downplaying the rise of Caitlin Clark, the commissioner now finds herself exposed as one of the weakest leaders in professional sports. And the irony? It's pure karma. For months, Engelbert seemed untouchable, acting as though her position was secure and her authority unquestioned. But the decisions, the comments, and the quiet contempt she allegedly held for players finally boiled over. Now, she isn't just dealing with unhappy athletes. She's staring down a full-blown revolt. The downfall really began with her treatment of Caitlin Clark. Instead of embracing the player who single-handedly pushed the WNBA into record-breaking ratings and national headlines, Engelbert's attitude toward Clark was dismissive, almost hostile. Her comments minimized Clark's influence and value, as if the league's new star was nothing more than a small piece of the bigger machine. But it turns out players were paying attention. Fans were paying attention. And when Engelbert doubled down on that attitude, the backlash only grew louder. Then came the turning point, the leaked conversation. Nafisa Collier, one of the league's most respected players, revealed a private discussion with Engelbert that blew the situation wide open. In that conversation, Engelbert allegedly disparaged Caitlin Clark, painting her as overrated and undeserving of the praise she was receiving. But it didn't stop there. Engelbert reportedly told players they should be grateful for their salaries, dismissing calls for growth, reform, and better support. The leak was devastating. What had previously been speculation about Engelbert's cold and controlling leadership was suddenly confirmed in her own words. Fans erupted. Players took to social media. Analysts tore apart her credibility on national TV. The story wasn't just about one comment. It was about the culture Engelbert created, a culture where players were silenced, their influence diminished, and their value dismissed. Her attempt to control Caitlin Clark's rise was now public knowledge, and the league could no longer pretend it wasn't happening. When the backlash hit, Engelbert had a chance to recover. She could have admitted fault. She could have shown humility, accountability, or at least some empathy toward the players she offended. But instead, her response was weak, defensive, and ultimately self-destructive. She denied. She played the victim. She tried to spin the story as a misunderstanding. And each time she spoke, her reputation sank even further. The media didn't buy it. Major voices in sports commentary came down hard on her, with Stephen A. Smith and Scott Van Pelt both condemning her inability to handle the crisis. Analysts framed her as a commissioner out of touch, unwilling to adapt, and incapable of leading the league through its most important moment. And the players? They stopped hiding their frustration. Nafisa Collier refused to meet with Engelbert, an open rejection that made headlines and embarrassed the commissioner further. Caitlin Clark, normally diplomatic and careful with her words, voiced her support for better leadership, making it clear that reform was overdue. Sophie Cunningham went even further, publicly calling Engelbert a delusional leader who put herself before the needs of the league. These weren't whispers. They were open statements, direct shots at the commissioner's authority. For any sports league, when players start publicly rejecting leadership, it's over. Authority only exists when people believe in it, and Engelbert's authority has collapsed in plain sight. Fans have joined the chorus too. Protests online and in arenas are demanding change, with chants and signs calling for Engelbert's resignation. The outcry is overwhelming, and for the first time, people are asking if the WNBA can even move forward with her still in charge. That's where Adam Silver enters the picture. As commissioner of the NBA, Silver has always had indirect influence over the WNBA. And now, the pressure is mounting on him to step in and clean up the mess. Analysts, players, and fans are openly calling for him to replace Engelbert before the league's reputation suffers irreparable damage. Behind the scenes, whispers point to names like Nancy Lieberman and Sandy Brondello as possible successors. Both respected, both connected deeply to basketball, both seen as leaders who could restore stability and trust. The fact that these names are even being discussed shows how little faith remains in Engelbert's ability to hold the position. The Athletic has already hinted that Engelbert is hanging on by a thread, with her departure seeming more like an inevitability than a possibility. The bigger story, though, is what this all represents. This is not just about one commissioner falling from grace. This is about the players taking back power. For years, the WNBA has relied on players to sacrifice, to stay quiet, to accept poor treatment in the name of league survival. But now, the dynamic has changed. Athletes like Collier and Clark are no longer content to play along with outdated leadership. They are speaking out, exposing flaws, and demanding accountability. This is a shift in power dynamics, and it shows the rise of athlete empowerment in women's sports. The leak from Collier was a spark, but the fire was already burning. Engelbert's inability to adapt, her arrogance, and her disconnect from the people she leads turn the players against her. And once that trust is broken, it's impossible to rebuild. Her downfall is a cautionary tale for every sports executive. Disrespect your athletes and you won't survive. The role of a commissioner is not just to maintain order. It's to listen, to protect, and to guide. Engelbert failed in all three areas. Instead of transparency, she gave excuses. Instead of accountability, she deflected. Instead of empathy, she projected authority she didn't have. The damage is irreversible. Now, the WNBA faces a pivotal moment. Do they cling to Engelbert and hope the noise dies down? Or do they recognize the reality that her leadership has ended and bring in someone who can actually rebuild the league's reputation? The calls for new leadership are deafening. Nancy Lieberman and Sandy Brondello aren't just names thrown around for show. They represent exactly what the league has been missing: integrity, respect, and a connection to the sport and its players. Leaders who know what it takes to earn trust, not demand it. And Adam Silver? He doesn't have the luxury of staying quiet anymore. The WNBA's reputation is tied to the NBA, and as long as Engelbert remains in charge, the chaos reflects back on both leagues. If Silver wants stability, he'll have to act. So where does this leave Engelbert? Isolated, rejected, exposed. The commissioner who once presented herself as a stabilizing force is now seen as the biggest threat to the league's credibility. Her legacy is no longer about growth or progress. It's about arrogance, denial, and failure. This is the end of her leadership story. And yes, it feels like karma. Because when you silence players, when you dismiss fans, and when you sabotage your own stars, the downfall doesn't just happen, it's earned. And now the WNBA has a chance to turn the page. If they do, This crisis could become a turning point, a moment where the league recognizes a need for empathetic, player-centered leadership, a moment where athlete empowerment is no longer seen as a threat, but as the foundation for growth. If they don't, the damage will only deepen. For now, one thing is clear. Kathy Engelbert's reign is over, whether she steps down voluntarily or not. Let's hand out some well-deserved awards. The biggest own goal award to Engelbert for turning her own players against her with arrogance and secrecy. The MVP of Transparency award to Nafisa Collier, whose leak exposed the truth and gave players the power to demand change. The Best Supporting Role in a Public Collapse award to Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and every player who refused to stay silent. And finally, the Imminent Replacement award goes to Engelbert herself, because the writing is on the wall and her exit is only a matter of time. So what do you think? Should Engelbert step down now before things get worse? Would Nancy Lieberman or Sandy Brondello be the right choice to bring respect back to the league? Or is there someone else who could restore trust between players and leadership? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want to keep up with the wildest meltdowns in sports and pop culture, and buckle in, because the WNBA is about to enter a new era, whether Engelbert likes it or not. The fallout surrounding Kathy Engelbert isn't slowing down, it's intensifying. What started as criticism has turned into a full-blown collapse of trust. And at this point, even resignation might not be enough to clean up the mess she's made. Because this isn't just about her leadership anymore. It's about the culture she created, the voices she tried to silence, and the irreversible damage she caused by treating the league's most important players like they were liabilities instead of leaders. When Nafisa Collier leaked that private conversation, everything changed. It was no longer speculation. No longer just whispers behind closed doors. Suddenly, the WNBA had cold, hard proof that the commissioner, the very person who's supposed to advocate for players, was talking down to them, allegedly mocking Caitlin Clark, allegedly saying players should just be grateful for their paychecks, allegedly prioritizing control over collaboration. That's not leadership. That's dictatorship wrapped in a PR smile. And players didn't stay quiet. They couldn't. Nafisa Collier publicly refused to meet with Engelbert after the leak. Caitlin Clark voiced her support for a leadership overhaul. Sophie Cunningham called Engelbert delusional, making it crystal clear that the locker rooms were fed up with the commissioner's games. At this point, Engelbert isn't just unpopular. She's completely untrusted. And that's the final nail. Once you lose the players, there's no coming back. Because the WNBA isn't just some faceless corporate entity. It is the players. They are the product. And when the product is rejecting the leadership, that's not a management problem. It's a league-wide emergency. Yet somehow, Engelbert keeps acting like it's all just noise. Her public statements have been robotic, emotionless, and frankly, disconnected from reality. She's denied everything, dodged accountability, and tried to pivot the blame onto misunderstandings or taken out of context for remarks. It's not working, because when athletes, fans, media, and even sponsors are calling for your resignation, you can't gaslight your way through it. The only way forward now is out. And don't think this is just drama for the sake of drama. This is about the future of the league. The WNBA is at a crossroads. Caitlin Clark's rise has pulled in millions of new eyes. Ratings are climbing. Sponsorships are growing. For the first time in decades, people are talking about women's basketball as a mainstream entertainment product. This is the moment the league has been waiting for. But that growth, that energy, it's all being overshadowed by Engelbert's chaos. And that's where Adam Silver's name keeps coming up. As commissioner of the NBA and the de facto overseer of professional basketball in the U.S., Silver has the power to step in. And from the looks of it, he's being pushed to. People inside and outside the WNBA are calling on Silver to intervene, not just for damage control, but to protect the league's future. The Athletic is already reporting that Engelbert's days are numbered, and insider sources say Silver is under pressure to make a move fast before this snowballs even further. Because right now, this isn't just bad press. It's a full-scale credibility crisis. And the consequences aren't hypothetical. They're happening now. Players are losing faith in the front office. Fans are turning their frustration into boycotts. Analysts are torching the commissioner's reputation nightly. If Engelbert stays, the league doesn't just look disorganized. It looks hostile to the very people who make it run. It's not just embarrassing, it's dangerous. Enter Nancy Lieberman and Sandy Brondello, two names that keep coming up in conversations about Engelbert's replacement. And unlike Engelbert, both women actually understand the game. They have real basketball credentials, real locker room respect, and most importantly, they have none of Engelbert's baggage. Lieberman, in particular, is viewed as a player's advocate, someone who's lived the grind of women's basketball and fought for its growth long, before it was trendy. She's not coming in with spreadsheets and corporate jargon. She's coming in with heart and credibility. And that's exactly what the WNBA needs right now. Brondello? Same deal. She's respected, proven, not some figurehead. And she knows how to command a room without alienating everyone in it. Either one would be a monumental upgrade over what the league currently has. And fans are already saying it loud. Bring them in now. Because here's what this really comes down to. Leadership that listens. The WNBA doesn't need a commissioner who talks down to its stars. It doesn't need someone who fears player influence or tries to suppress rising voices. It needs someone who sees growth as partnership, not a threat. Someone who isn't afraid of Caitlin Clark's popularity, but sees it as a launch pad for the entire sport. Engelbert clearly couldn't handle that. She saw star power and felt control slipping. She saw outspoken players and chose censorship over support. And now, she's learning the hard way. You can't lead people you don't respect. What's happening to Engelbert isn't just some PR storm. It's what happens when you build your house on ego instead of trust. She didn't just lose control. She lost the right to have it. And if she doesn't step down soon, the damage will keep spreading. This could affect negotiations, endorsements, player recruitment, brand deals. Everything the league has worked for could unravel because one person refused to admit she was wrong. And honestly, the league deserves better. The players deserve better. Caitlin Clark, who has done more for the visibility of women's basketball in 1 year than Engelbert has in her entire tenure, deserves better. This is supposed to be a breakthrough moment for the sport, not a cautionary tale. But if Engelbert stays, this moment will be remembered not as the rise of women's basketball, but as a time its own leadership tried to silence the very stars pulling it forward. Let's not let that happen. At this point, Kathy Engelbert is clinging to her title while the league crumbles beneath her. Every day she stays, the WNBA looks more dysfunctional, more out of touch, and more hostile to the very players it relies on to stay relevant. And now the optics aren't just bad, they're radioactive. You have stars rejecting her leadership on record, players walking out of meetings, top analysts openly laughing at her responses, entire segments on ESPN dedicated to how unfit she is to lead. Sponsors are watching. Investors are getting nervous. And Adam Silver? He's under mounting pressure to fix it yesterday. Because here's what no one can deny anymore. This is not a temporary scandal. It's not a PR blip. It's a systemic leadership failure. Let's be real. When you have a commissioner who can't even hold a meeting with her own players because they refuse to show up, you've lost a room. You've lost the league. And honestly, you've lost the right to lead. That's the position Engelbert is in right now. And it didn't happen overnight. It's the result of months, years, of treating players like employees instead of partners, of seeing stars like Caitlin Clark as PR tools instead of people, of pushing a top-down control agenda while ignoring the very voices who built the sport. This wasn't just about one leak. That leak was just a match. The gasoline? That was Engelbert's entire leadership style. Calculated, dismissive, and completely detached from the player's reality. Now that everything is out in the open, she's been exposed for what she truly is, a commissioner with no locker room support, no strategic vision, and no real connection to the soul of the league. And fans aren't stupid. They see through the silence. They see through the excuses. They've heard the corporate buzzwords before. But what they want now is change. Real, immediate, no-nonsense change. Because here's the danger. If Engelbert stays, the damage doesn't just linger. It grows. You'll have rising stars like Caitlin Clark starting to reevaluate whether they want to be part of a league that refuses to protect and uplift them. You'll have veteran players like Nafi Sakalya feeling betrayed, sidelined, and unheard. You'll have a fractured culture that no branding campaign can fix. The league finally has momentum, and the person in charge is actively reversing it. Let's talk about Adam Silver again, because whether he likes it or not, this mess is now his problem. The NBA and the WNBA aren't two separate worlds. They're intertwined, financially, structurally, publicly. When the WNBA's credibility takes a hit, so does the NBA's. And Silver knows that. That's why people are calling on him to step in. Because at this point, Engelbert stepping down isn't just about optics. It's about survival. There's too much at stake. The growth of women's basketball. The trust of a new generation of fans. The credibility of an entire sport finally getting its moment. And all of it is being overshadowed by one leader who's clearly in way over her head. The fix? Start with leadership that actually respects players. People like Nancy Lieberman and Sandy Brondello aren't just experienced. They're respected. They've lived the game, coached it, advocated for it. They don't need a PR team to spin their values. They've already earned trust by showing up and putting in the work. And most importantly, they wouldn't treat players like problems. They wouldn't downplay their voices. They wouldn't leak arrogance from behind closed doors. Lieberman and Brondello represent something Engelbert never could. Authentic leadership rooted in the game itself. That's what this league needs. That's what players are begging for. And that's what fans deserve. Because this league has a chance, a real chance, to become a powerhouse in women's sports. But that can't happen with Engelbert at the helm. She's lost the trust. She's lost the moment. And now, she's just in the way. Let's hand out one final award before we close this chapter. The Final Whistle Award to Kathy Engelbert for proving once and for all that leadership without trust is just a title. And that titles mean nothing when your entire team walks away from you. Now it's your turn. Should Engelbert finally step down before she takes the whole league down with her? Would Lieberman or Brondello be the right move to rebuild what's left? Is it already too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the wildest scandals in sports and beyond. Because in this league, it's not just about who scores. It's about who listens. And Kathy Engelbert never did.